You are looking at a $300,000 20-year subscription service with no free trial and a price tag that only goes up. And that is just the baseline cost before they even step foot on a college campus. Right now, millions of Americans are standing at a brutal, unprecedented crossroads, forced into a choice previous generations never had to make: parenthood or poverty. We are witnessing a quiet, absolute revolution where the traditional American dream is being completely dismantled, replaced by a desperate fight for financial survival. But what exactly happens to a society when its most fundamental promise becomes an unaffordable luxury? The answer is already here, and it's not what you've been told. This isn't just a cultural trend or a few young adults opting for more free time. We are watching the bedrock of the modern economy crack under its own weight in real time. Right now, politicians and corporations are sounding the alarm over plummeting birth rates, absolutely terrified of a shrinking workforce and a collapsing consumer base. They are panicking because an entire demographic is suddenly refusing to participate in a system they were groomed for since birth. And when the working class can no longer afford to literally reproduce the working class, every single institution we rely on is pushed to the absolute brink of collapse.
To understand how we reached this breaking point, you have to look at the blueprint we were all handed since childhood. You know the exact one. The white picket fence, the 2.5 kids, a golden retriever running around in the backyard, and a reliable pension waiting at the end of the road. For decades, this wasn't just some Hollywood fantasy. It was a functioning social contract. It was the absolute baseline expectation for a successful adulthood in the United States. You graduate, you secure a decent paying job, you buy a starter home, and you naturally start a family. Having children wasn't treated as a luxury or a massive financial calculation. It was just the inevitable next step in the game of life. It was a promise made to generations before us, built on the premise that hard work guarantees stability. And for a long time, that formula actually worked. But if you try to follow that exact same nostalgic blueprint today, you are going to hit a brutal wall. Because the finish line hasn't just been moved, the entire track has been dismantled. But here is the massive blind spot almost everyone completely misses. We keep framing this as a tragic loss. We are constantly told that an entire generation has been robbed of the American dream, as if we are all just sitting around mourning the loss of a life we desperately wanted. What if we weren't robbed? What if we just took a hard look at the actual price tag of that dream and walked away? The unspoken truth is that this isn't just systemic failure. It is an active rebellion. When you actually run the numbers, when infant care costs more than in-state college tuition, and a basic starter home devours half your take-home pay, surrendering the old blueprint isn't a generational defeat. It is a highly calculated survival tactic. For millions, the new American dream is no longer about what you can aggressively accumulate. It is about what you can finally afford to subtract. And the very first thing getting cut from the budget: children. But here is where the narrative takes a sharp, uncomfortable turn. We point to that staggering $300,000 price tag. We blame the crushing rent, the stagnant wages, the systemic collapse. It makes perfect economic sense, and more importantly, it is the ultimate socially acceptable alibi. But what if that financial nightmare is just a highly convenient cover story? What if the government magically wiped out all student debt tomorrow, completely subsidized infant care, and handed out affordable starter homes like it was 1965 again? The deeply hidden truth that nobody wants to admit at the holiday dinner table is that millions of people still wouldn't opt in. The economic crisis didn't just force our hands. It accidentally gave an entire generation the perfect excuse to reject a biological script we never actually wanted to read in the first place. We aren't just adapting to an empty wallet. We are discovering a completely different definition of wealth, because when the noise clears, the ultimate luxury of this decade isn't a nursery down the hall. It is absolute, unapologetic control over your own time. And society is absolutely terrified by just how many of us are realizing we prefer it that way. Look at how the traditional world reacts to this choice. The immediate pushback is always about legacy and selfishness. We are aggressively sold the idea that the only valid way to leave a mark on this world is to pass down your DNA, and that without a child, your story just abruptly ends. The conventional script tells us that opting out is a shallow existence, that you are just hoarding resources while the noble parents sacrifice everything for the future. But peel back the romanticized layer of that conventional path, and you expose its fatal flaw. It operates like an existential pyramid scheme. You are expected to endure decades of burnout, debt, and compromised ambitions, outsourcing your own unfulfilled dreams to a child who never consented to the job, hoping they figure it out, only for them to be handed the exact same crushing pressures. The people stepping off this treadmill aren't rejecting meaning. They are completely hacking it. Instead of treating legacy as something you biologically reproduce, they are treating it as something you actively construct. By reclaiming those thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars, they are funneling that massive surplus directly into innovation, global mobility, intentional communities, and personal growth. The old way demands you sacrifice your present to build a hypothetical future for someone else. This new paradigm demands radical ownership of your present, proving that a complete, highly impactful life doesn't require a biological sequel to justify its worth. And that radical ownership is where the ultimate unfair advantage lives. The deeply guarded secret that makes the traditional establishment so intensely uncomfortable is the terrifying amount of leverage you instantly gain when you refuse to play their heaviest card. Think about the math of human leverage. Your 20s, 30s, and 40s are your peak compounding years, not just financially, but energetically. While the conventional blueprint forces you into a defensive, high-stakes survival game, hemorrhaging capital on exorbitant daycare, forcing you to cling to mediocre jobs just to keep the family health insurance, and anchoring you to hyperinflated housing markets just for the school districts, you are suddenly cleared to play pure offense. You get to weaponize that reclaimed $300,000. You are buying absolute unfiltered optionality. You have the runway to take massive entrepreneurial risks, pivot entire career trajectories, relocate across the globe on a random Tuesday, or simply walk away from a toxic corporate grind, all because you aren't held hostage by the systemic pressure of providing for dependents. You aren't just bypassing the cost of a child. You are quite literally buying out your own contract with the system. You become economically and geographically untethered. And in a modern economy meticulously engineered to keep you exhausted, indebted, and compliant through the sheer terror of failing your family, becoming untethered isn't just a lifestyle choice. It is the most dangerous, powerful cheat code you can possibly activate. But activating that cheat code triggers an aggressive immune response from the exact society you just walked away from. When you strip away the relentless survival metrics, the desperate scramble for school districts, the biological ticking clock, the societal applause for doing what is expected, you don't just magically float into financial nirvana. You step off the edge of the map into a terrifying, unscripted void. And this is the ultimate trap the system actively banks on. Without the pre-packaged milestones of the traditional blueprint to routinely validate your worth, you are forced to manufacture your own meaning from absolute scratch. There is no default community. There is no built-in legacy. If you stumble, if you feel even a fraction of a second of doubt, the establishment is right there waiting in the dark to weaponize it against you. You face a level of existential isolation that is designed to absolutely crush your resolve, forcing you to stand entirely alone and answer the one terrifying question most people use parenthood to avoid asking themselves. Who are you when you strip away the title of provider, protector, and sacrifice? Who are you when you can no longer outsource your life's purpose to a biological sequel and you finally have to live entirely for yourself? That unscripted void isn't a punishment for abandoning the blueprint. It is the exact space where true autonomy is born. When you stop hiding behind the exhausting nobility of raising the next generation, you are forced to confront the beautiful, terrifying reality of your own present. We were warned that a society forced to choose between parenthood and poverty would simply collapse under the weight of its own despair. But that was the establishment's ultimate miscalculation. Out of that systemic failure, millions didn't accept defeat. They chose themselves. They looked at a rigged $300,000 20-year subscription service that guaranteed a lifetime of anxiety, and they simply walked away from the table. The dismantling of the traditional American dream is not a generational tragedy. It is the most profound financial and spiritual liberation of our time. A society doesn't end when its people stop blindly reproducing the past to prop up a failing economic engine. It evolves when they finally realize that the nostalgic blueprint was just a highly expensive cage all along. The dream didn't die, it was outgrown. You no longer have to exhaust your entire existence paying for the white picket fence. For the first time in history, you just get to walk out into the open field. And out there is no master timeline. There are no predetermined milestones you have to blindly hit just to prove your existence has value. You finally get to decide what a meaningful life actually looks like when you aren't just desperately surviving to pay for it. It takes a staggering amount of courage to look at the life everyone told you to want, run the actual math, and decide to build something else entirely. You aren't broken for wanting peace over pressure. You aren't selfish for choosing absolute freedom over a system that only views you as an economic engine. You are just finally awake. The traditional establishment relies heavily on our silence and our collective guilt to keep this obsolete game running. So it is time to break that silence. Drop a comment below and tell us exactly what you are building out there in that open field. Your reality is the exact permission someone else needs right now to stop apologizing for their own choices. And if you are ready to keep dismantling these outdated blueprints, hit subscribe. We are writing the new script together.